For our final session, we are so pleased to bring Richard Ball, Commissioner of the New York State Department of Agriculture and Markets, to the stage to talk with Grow New York Program Director Jenn Smith about his thoughts on sustainability, intensifying food production in New York, in the Northeast. And on a personal level, I just want to say thank you to the Commissioner myself. He has been a staunch, unwavering leader for the agricultural community in New York State, and we are so grateful for everything that he does for our farmers, our growers, and our agri-food system. So it is my honor and privilege to introduce our Commissioner of Agriculture in New York State, Richard Ball.
Hello. Thank you for agreeing to have this conversation with me.
My pleasure.
I think it's especially timely. Our organization, Grow New York, is under the umbrella of Cornell's Center for Regional Economic Advancement, and together with New York Ag and Markets and the NASDA Foundation, which is the National Association of State Departments of Ag, and Farm Credit East, and a lot of community-based farming, food and agribusiness organizations from Maine to Pennsylvania, we're working together on a regional food business center proposal. There's a USDA RFP out, and the idea is that the funding behind the proposal will go to support the competitiveness of small and mid-sized farms. It'll help us perform a needs assessment to really evaluate where we need to be focusing funding. It'll result in regional coordination, business technical assistance, direct capacity building, and infrastructure development. And so I wanted to talk with you about regional food systems and how we can sustainably intensify regional food production here in New York. And I gave you fair warning that I was going to call upon a report that was published recently called A Regional Imperative, The Case for Regional Food Systems, which was produced by the Thomas Lyson Center for Civic Agriculture and Food Studies by Catherine Roof and Kate Clancy. And they talked through a lot of different elements of what makes a regional food system viable, and I wanted to get your thoughts on that. I'd love to start with, when we talk about regionalism, what are we talking about? What's the unit that is a region? Why is the Northeast a suitable unit beyond just geography? What are the commonalities in scales, in markets, in values, and in norms when we think about a Northeastern food system?
Sure. Yeah, well, that's a whole lot of questions.
I gave you a lot of preamble.
But it's an awesome thing to think about, especially in context of the last couple of years that we've all lived through with COVID-19. I think that every state and every region recognize their shortcomings in their food supply chain. We saw our farmers get hurt. We saw people not have access to food, and how do we learn some lessons here? I think fundamentally, first of all, my world map looks an awful lot like New York State. But this region is a special region, and the commissioners, secretaries, and directors in the Northeast all work very closely together. We share a lot together. But the first thing I think of is that, one of the lessons we learned was that we better have a responsive and a resilient food system here that we have access to. And frankly, we all need to work together to make sure that everyone remembers that. Because the public's memory can be short. When things get better and all of a sudden there's plenty of food around, they'll forget that it was New York State, this region that stepped up and kept the food supply chain working. So we need that system here, and we don't want to depend on another country, another region of the world, when we need necessary things to stay alive. So that's one lesson I think that excites me about this particular project. The other thing is you stop and look at our resources here, and I'm just looking at the resources we have in this room and the people that I'm running into in this room. You know, we're not on fire in New York State. We have access to water in New York State. We have good land in New York State. We've got the best land grant system for education here. We've got some of the best farmers in the world here. We rank in the top 10 in over 30 commodities in New York State. As the past president of the North American State Departments of Agriculture, we rank in every single conversation that we have about everything with the exception of maybe cotton or rice or sugar.
Citrus.
Citrus, we're in those conversations. We figure in that prominently. And so we have the additional advantage in the Northeast of living and farming and working a couple of hours away from the largest, most diverse marketplace anywhere in the world. So that's why that's so important that we pursue this grant. I was happy to call the Secretary of Ag about it and talk to him and the undersecretaries. So I'm excited. The collaboration is what's exciting because it's not just one entity, it's, as you listed, there's multiple, every state in the Northeast is involved in this. And they all have resources in their own states, and that's what we have in common. Mm-hmm. That's what we can build on. That's our strength.
Yeah, and that, you know, that decentralization piece, I think finding a way to share the benefits throughout the Northeast and really reaching into those community-based organizations is going to be key to this proposal being successful and then ultimately to delivering on its potential.
Yeah.
When you think about developing a resilient and intensified food system in New York and in the Northeast, what kind of timeline are we talking about? Yesterday, right? We want it to happen now, but realistically, what's that roadmap like and how long does it take us to get there?
Sure. Fair question. You mentioned yesterday, and I just had to smile because I think of something my grandfather, when I was helping him milk cows when I was 7, he used to say, you know, the best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago, but the second best time is today. So the timeline is one we're going to be able to measure. I think there's metrics we can put in place to measure that, and that's going to be important. But this is dynamic because the marketplaces change every day, and the farmers change, you know, pretty regularly too. Consumer preferences change every day. But we got to start. We got to start today, and we got to stay in touch. If there's a fault I can see in our agricultural community is that we haven't stayed in touch with our consumers as much as we should. Their preferences change, their needs change, their quantities change, new things come along. So this is very much a dynamic situation, I think. We need to know each other better. We need to spend some time knowing each other. At a time, particularly in New York State, when the divide and the differences between upstate and downstate have probably never been more stark than they are right now. We have to strike now. We have to take advantage of this COVID-19 lessons and the need to understand our food supply chain. We have an opportunity here to connect the dots in a very, very good way. All kinds of things are involved with that. School, farm-to-school activities, climate activities, sitting down and finding out what the market actually is and what they really want. Having them not have to assume that we're all upstate or in the Northeast being paid not to grow corn. All those misnomers that we need to connect dots about. So I think, yes, challenging, and it's going to be dynamic, but it's something we need to take care of. If you value a relationship, then you take care of it. We value this relationship if we're going to be successful at it, and both sides need to take care of it.
Yeah. There is, I don't mean to be a New York chauvinist, right? But there is something, I think, special that we can learn about the unique conditions here in New York. And I'm thinking about, we do have these tremendous natural resources upstate. We have a tradition of farming and food production. We have these enormous population centers down the road. Those population centers are, peopled by communities that have, in many cases, not received equitable access to food, certainly not received equitable access to participation in the agricultural economy, and yet we see that changing, and we see the emergence of indoor farming and urban farming. We see opportunities for new and diverse farmers to join the ag community in New York State, and I think that there's an exciting opportunity for us to kind of build on those awarenesses and take our learnings and open the conversation with the other participants in this regional proposal. This decentralized approach, using it to make sure that we're meeting the entire population's nutritional and cultural needs and preferences. What role do you see the urban centers playing in that?
It's huge. It's huge. And, for us at the department, the last time the USDA NAS statistics went out about agriculture, we saw some of the trends that we all anticipated seeing. The number of women on farms went up a lot. A little side note, it's because they started counting women for the first time as principals on a farm. They hadn't been doing that. So we saw that number jump. We looked at the number of small farms, big farms, how many acres, pretty much predictable. But one thing that scared the heck out of me personally was the number of our BIPOC community in farming was going down. Why is that happening? Because I do think that New York State agriculture should reflect the people that live and work in New York State. So we pulled together a work group of people that I knew, from the BIPOC community, and we listened. And we heard about the disconnects between their county, between the financial system, between the policy, between the department, between Cornell, between the learning experiences. There was just disconnects all over the place. So we've doubled down on that. We put together a program to go forward, present it to the governor, and I'm happy to say that we've got some significant funding in the budget to address some of those things. So urban agriculture is a big deal. This is not about teaching New York City to grow all the food they need on a rooftop or in a corner. It's about connecting the dots and having that experience. I was with Secretary Vilsack a few weeks ago, and he kind of teased me a little bit, and he said, "Richard, how many urban farms are there in New York City?" 600. There are 600 urban farms in New York City. What a great opportunity for people in New York City to understand a little bit about agriculture. That's an opportunity right there. That's a touch point right there. For me personally, on my farm, before I was a commissioner, I got acquainted with a group in the South Bronx who was looking to figure out how to improve the situation in the South Bronx. For those of you who remember Fort Apache growing up, the South Bronx has no grocery stores. They have no farmers market.
Yep.
They're home to the largest, Hunts Point Market is the largest terminal market in the world, but there's no access for the community to that food. And they have the highest rate of juvenile diabetes and childhood obesity in the country. And there are 30,000 people per square mile in the South Bronx. That's a marketplace that has no idea what we do up here. I live in Schoharie County. We have about 30,000 people per square county, but we do have food. There's an opportunity to connect dots there. We can do something about that nutrition, about that access to food. Happy to tell you that we're almost done now building a food hub in the South Bronx to access for those 5 boroughs food that's New York grown and certified in New York State, and have it be able to get to the food box programs into those communities down there. So they need to be involved. I was able to visit, when I was down there, PS 32 in Brooklyn. And this is kind of a fun story if you will indulge me. But they were doing some New York food in their cafeteria, which was great. Chef George was there, who was great. And I had brought along a bag full of butternut squash seeds. They were showing me their urban garden. It was in the middle of their school, a little courtyard, no place to park a car, but it was a place where they had a little garden. They were growing some plants, they were growing some lettuce. Chef George was bringing them in the cafeteria, and they were enjoying their own lettuce and a few tomatoes. Didn't go far. And I put out these butternut squash seeds, and I had the kids plant these seeds in little pots with their growing media, grow them in their little greenhouse area there. And I had them write down their name on a tag and put a tag in each pot so they would know that was their plant. When those plants were about this tall, at the department we went and got them, brought them up to Schoharie, New York, and planted them out in the field. And I looked at the Chancellor of Education and the head of school food at the time, and I had them. They couldn't say no. I said, can you get these kids up to Schoharie, New York this fall? And of course they had to say yes, because they were boxed in there. And they brought those kids up from PS 32 in Brooklyn. Chef George came too. And they drove a bus up and they came to Schoharie, New York, and they walked out into our fields. We had planted those plants in the field with our plants, with our butternut squash. Those kids found their plant. They found their name tag, they found their plant, they harvested that squash, and we sent it back to their school along with Chef George. And every one of them said, can I work for you when I grow up? We had a big lunch, and some of those kids had never had salad in their life. And I thought, this is connecting the dots at its best. This is a way for urban ag to understand New York State ag, Northeast ag. This is a good lesson here. We need to do more of that. So I think that real lesson of urban ag is that, yes, they can grow real food, but maybe the people that grow and live in that little neighborhood there will realize there's more to New York State, more to the Northeast than the 10 square blocks around our school system.
Yeah.
That's a winner.
I read the report, the resiliency report that you put out. You invoked the working groups that produced the New York Food Supply Resiliency Report. And I know that equity and justice and stewardship were important focuses of those working groups. I'm wondering what the next steps for those working groups are, what the next steps as an outcome of that resiliency report are.
Well, it's good to do a study. It's good to have honest, accurate information to start off with, but now you have to act. And so we're doing that. We've got a whole list of groups, and procurement work groups, and community garden work groups, the urban garden. Now we have to act. Now we have to achieve. So I think, part of the commonalities we have there are identifying workforce challenges, workforce needs. That's going to be just monstrous. There's a train coming. And I see it when I get around New York State and I go to all our farms and I don't see enough workers. Mm-hmm. I don't see enough middle management. I don't see enough next generation. We've got plenty of it, but I don't see enough of it. And then I go and I visit our food manufacturing facilities, our dairy plants, and I don't see enough people coming into work. I don't see enough people in the pipeline. So I think the one commonality we have here is we've got to identify pathways to those careers in agriculture that we need to identify and make happen, because this is coming at us really fast. And it's not a secret anywhere in the country that unemployment is where it probably ought to be, but we don't have enough workers walking in the door looking for jobs. So we're just going to have to double down on that. And I see that, again, those statistics that Nash showed up, let's make sure that the population reflects the people that we've got going on here. This is for New Yorkers, it's going to be a little bit of a shift in recognizing our market here. We've been very good at recognizing the global markets, the international markets. 40% of our product in New York gets exported, goes somewhere. When my grandfather was farming, he didn't think about the value of the US dollar against foreign currency.
Right.
He didn't think about how much China was buying. He didn't worry about what kind of year the European Union had in dairy. He worried about his cows, and he worried about the weather, and he worried about the price of milk and those normal things. But our farmers today worry about all those things. And so now we have an opportunity to shift our focus. Let's make sure that New York State is New York's customer. Mm-hmm. Let's make sure that we double down on that. As a grower of and shipper and packer, I get identified in what's called the Blue Book as someone who grows carrots and parsnips and things like that, and number of trailer loads and all that. And because I'm in that book, I used to get a targeted mailing from the Canadian provinces of Ontario and Quebec. And they would say, this is what we grow, here's our growers, here's our quality, here's our access to your market, we can be in your market in this number of hours, here's our phone number, 4-color glossy brochure. And I thought, well, this is amazing. Canada has figured out we're their customer. When are we going to figure out that New York is our customer? So let's shift our focus away from some of those other markets and look right here in New York State at our needs. Again, COVID lessons here are telling us this. So I'm excited about our procurement work group and our mission. The governor has made it very clear. Let's make sure that New York is New York's customer in our institutions, in our schools. Let's make sure that we look there first. So I feel pretty good about that opportunity because we don't own the market, but we should own the market.
Yeah, that market access and institutional piece it's exciting. We have a colleague here, Cheryl Belinsky, who's done some great work on that.
She's fantastic. Yeah. She's a rock star.
Yeah. So, the Grow New York Summit is built around the Grow New York competition, which is the, innovation startup competition. And we balance out the day. So we have pitches from teams that are, ready to grow their startups quickly and make a regional impact here in New York. Doing so, they come from all over the world. They address a wide variety of constraints from the furthest upstream soil health needs all the way down to, nutritional and dietary and cultural preferences that people express when they go into the supermarket and pull something off the shelf. We also balance it with the symposium, right, which is the panel conversations. You've heard some of them today. And we used as our theme this year the 2030 Project, which is an initiative on the part of Cornell to kind of transcend disciplines and work collaboratively to address the need to drive to net zero. And in using that theme here, we took our usual approach to the symposium, which is finding the place where innovation and food and farming intersect, and we added the dimension of the climate crisis. And in doing so, we're talking about constraints and challenges, but there's also a lot of space for optimism, especially when we're working with innovative companies that are dedicating their energies to coming up with practical and practicable solutions. And you and I had lunch together today at the student stage, which is, I have no doubt, is going to be a source for future Grow New York Big Show competitors. I just wondered, wanted to get your thoughts on some of the pitches you saw today and some of the activity that the youth in New York State are bringing to the agri-food system and the optimism that it shares.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. I had to smile at some of the projects, and you had to just love the energy that was there. I talked about getting around the state, and there's plenty to worry about. I've never seen so much uncertainty on our farms as I see today, and I've been farming since I was 18 years old. I've seen plenty of uncertainty. But Ukraine, global events, climate, national events, local events, New York events. There's so much uncertainty out there. But you can't help but get excited when you see that energy. I get to spend a lot of time with the FFA state officers in New York. They're amazing, and it's been a great tradition for me. It's one of the best parts about being a commissioner of ag, is getting to work with those young people and remember back the excitement, that there can be. I remember when I was first 7 years old, milking cows with my grandfather, and man, that was just, what a way to grow up, and it was pretty exciting for me. Unfortunately, they sold their farm when I was about 12, out from under me. So when I got out of high school, I went and knocked on a door and got a job working on a farm. And when I was 18, I was making a living working on a farm. And that was pretty exciting. And after 20 years of that, I was finally able to own my own farm, and that was really exciting. And now I have 3 generations on a farm, and that still excites me. But I have to tell you, when I see those young people, when I see that we're well on our way to adding 100 FFA chapters in New York State, which was a mission of ours 3 years ago, when I see that we're well on our way to doubling the number of ag teachers in our state, when I listen to those presentations, when I look at the quality of the individuals that are stepping forward and getting involved in agriculture, when I go to SUNY Cobleskill and I walk in the room and they brought together the ag school, about 120 kids from dairy herd management to agronomy to greenhouse production to sod production. And I look at 120 young people and I say, how many of you are from a farm and have a farm to go back to? And half of them say they do not. That excites me. Because there's a generation of people that don't understand everything there is to know about our food system, but they want to be a part of it. Farmers are fond of pointing out that 1% of us feed the other 99%. But would you bring in research, genetics, food systems, culinary arts, logistics, transportation, when you bring in all those things together, now we're talking about somewhere around 40% of the jobs in the country. We've got to start thinking about the food system. And when I look at the food system and the potential there for those young people to find careers in agriculture and to solve problems that we see as daunting right now, that excites the heck out of me.
That's lovely. Great. Well, I think we're going to end the conversation there, unless there's anything else you want to add. End it on an optimistic note.
I'm more optimistic today than I've ever been.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Great questions. Thank you.
Well, thanks. Thanks for talking.
You need to get back to work.
That's right. Got to get to work. I do have to get to work, and my work right now is to thank Commissioner Ball for joining us and thank Kathy Young for hosting the symposium. We tackled a lot of really important topics today. I think the conversations were wildly engaging and provocative, and hopefully are driving towards actionable solutions for us. I want to also take a moment. I wanted to talk about it during the session with Commissioner Ball, but ran out of time. Our colleagues at SUNY Morrisville have recently launched a really innovative food and ag business master's program, and I think that fits so well with the work we're doing here, this pipeline of innovation that we're developing from the student stage, through to college students, entrepreneurs that are here pitching their ideas. It's really beautiful, and it's wonderful to see the Grow New York program evolve and our partners evolve at the same time. SUNY Morrisville is a tremendously important partner of ours. So I also want to thank Brian for emceeing the live pitches, right, which there is no Grow New York Summit without the Grow New York competition, and we need somebody to introduce all of those startups. So it's a lot of work, and we're very appreciative. We at Cornell couldn't have achieved our goals for Grow New York without the support of New York State, our team of mentors, the speakers that brought the symposium together, and our highly engaged advisory partner group. We're also indebted to our summit sponsors Farm Credit East, Rabobank, Wegmans, and Upstate Venture Connect. And finally, we're very grateful to those of you watching, the folks that are here in the audience with me, and those of you online, including my mom. Hi, Mom. The judges are busy finishing up their deliberations and figuring out who's going to walk out with $1 million top prize. We will broadcast the awards presentation tomorrow morning at 9:30 on grownewyork.com. And this is all real time and live, so we don't know who the winners are right now, but that will be announced tomorrow morning out of the governor's office and on our website. Right now, we're going to ask folks that aren't part of the production team or the startups or the mentors to join the other guests in the Ecosystem Expo to kind of round out your summit experience while we turn over this room to get ready for the presentation of the awards. Thank you so much for coming, and applications for year 5 of Grow New York will open in April 2023. So looking forward to talking with you then.